Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of Perspectives on Sustainable Development. Again, I'm your host, Chris Whitehead, and I just want to start by saying it's a little bit of a crazy time right now. We're taping this episode on April 3rd, the day after President Trump imposed tariffs on essentially everyone in the world. So there's a lot of craziness going on right now, and frankly, a lot of negativity. And I try not to be negative ever, try to find the positive in things while still being objective, trying to drive things forward. I can't think of a better way and a better topic to cover today that might help further that goal a bit than actually what we're going to be talking about today with Maya and Anneke Van Rossum, the group actual Green Amendment. And before I bring them on, I want to tell a quick story. I followed Maya's work for some time on LinkedIn and other channels, and colleagues of mine have told me about her. And I invited her to speak at an environmental justice conference we put on at Rutgers 2.5 years ago or so, ballpark. And I forget how long we actually allowed her to talk, but it wasn't that long because of scheduling, like 15 minutes or something like that. And I saw her PowerPoint beforehand. I'm like, how are you going to get through all this content? Because there's something insane, like 50 slides or something. But not only did she get through it in that amount of time, I just remember after she was done, the whole the whole audience was absolutely revved up, wanted to buy her book, which I have a copy of right here, the Green Amendment. And I just remember thinking to myself, I kind of feel like I could run through a wall right now. I wanted to take this stuff on. So this says a lot about somebody if they could pack that amount of content into a small amount of time and get people that charged up. So I'm looking forward to the chat today. But not only that, we're also fortunate to have Anneke von Rossum today, her daughter, to talk about something I've found over the years in doing environmental justice and climate change work across the country, that these topics is something about it that tends to be very familiar, tends to loop in a sense of place at the core and tie back to culture and things that all of us care about. Over my left shoulder here, you'll see a picture of my family. I start off any EJ or climate talk I give with a picture of them because they're the reason why I'm as passionate as for everything I do in my work. And it's something I try and hold at the center of all our efforts. So with that, and without any further ado, I give you Maya and Anneke van Rossum. Thank you both and welcome.
Thanks so much.
I see Annika's quicker with the video and audio draw than I am.
Hey, I've heard younger people are better with that stuff. Well, thank you again both for joining. And if you can both, whoever wants to go first, just give a high-level biography of themselves, please.
Well, you've already said some kind things about me, so I'll let Annika go first.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm Anneke Van Rossum. I'm Maya's daughter. I don't know, I went to Ithaca College, where I majored in politics and then minored in environmental studies. I really enjoyed that. And then I got to the end and I kind of confirmed to my mom that I wanted to go on the path of environmental activism. So I was like, well, what do I do now? And spur of the moment senior year was like, she was like, you should go to law school. So I had to prep for the LSATs, and then did that. And I went to Vermont Law School where I focus. You don't get like a law degree in environment. You just like center your classes. So I centered my classes on environmental law and environmental topics. And I graduated in 2022 with my Juris Doctor. And yeah, and then I started working at Delaware Riverkeeper Network, where Maya is the Delaware Riverkeeper. And then I also do a lot of work at Green Amendments for the Generations and helping out with that where I can, whether it's educating or social media or things like that.
I'm sure.
So I am Maya Ben Rossum, and Chris, your introduction was very, very kind. I really appreciate that. So I've had the honor for the last 30 plus years of serving as the Delaware Riverkeeper and leading a 4-state advocacy and litigation organization called the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And we literally fight the good fight for the beautiful Delaware River that flows through 4 states, and also fight for all of the tributary streams and every square inch of the watershed, which dictates the health of the main stem Delaware River itself. During the course of my Delaware Riverkeeper work, I uh, led the way to an incredible legal victory where we used a long ignored constitutional provision in the Pennsylvania Constitution to challenge and defeat a devastatingly pro-fossil fuel law. And in the wake of that, I won't go too much further, but I conceived of this notion that every state across the nation should have what I now call a constitutional green amendment, recognizing and protecting the environmental rights of all people, including future generations. And so I embarked on a journey starting in 2014 to try to help communities nationwide to seek and secure and then enforce this kind of constitutional entitlement. Of course, with the goal of getting it at the federal level, but recognizing that that's going to take a little bit of a longer time. But
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's definitely a topic I want to cover a bit about how this has become a little bit of a family business. But I want to get started first. Just a fundamental question to both of you. And this kind of goes back to work I do. Any industrial client I speak to, large or small, anywhere around the country, hell, around the world actually, I tell them that before you embark on a project, if you want to do this right and minimize risks on many levels, you have to think about economic, environmental, and social impacts of that project. Doesn't matter how big, how small. If you take that on as a first step, you're doing a good thing for yourself and for the community, pardon me, actually, that you're currently going into. Wonder if you would agree with that and if you want to comment on that at all.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think it depends because sometimes I think for industry, the idea is kind of like a trade-off of, well, if we do this but give you this, then it makes up for any bad that's going on. We see that with a lot of, community benefits agreements that are going on with companies where it's like, well, we'll give you money to buy your ambulance and fix your municipal building and get a public pool, whatever. And not saying that communities don't need or want or should be able to get those things, but I think kind of the idea that that's a trade-off for what bad might happen if there is going to be bad. So while, yeah, I want companies to be mindful and thinking and do everything they can to like minimize the impact, it always kind of depends on what the impact is. And if your impact is going to ruin people's air, that's just unacceptable. And if you can't find a way to, not pollute people's air that increases the risk of Alzheimer's and brain damage and all that stuff, then your project isn't good. So it kind of like, yeah, I think it depends. And if companies can find a way to not hurt people, then and think about all those things you're talking about and really truly come with a good project for people, then by all means.
Yeah. But I think, Chris, that's really what makes you a good consultant, right? Is that I think you are very frank with your clients about what it takes in order to be a good corporate citizen and to be a real part of the community and to be able to live your life in a way that you can be proud of. Unfortunately, for a lot of companies, right, it's my way or the highway. They want to do it exactly how they want to propose it rather than looking at the goal they're actually trying to accomplish for a community. And that's where your work and our work as environmental activists really comes into play to take the stance of saying to companies that are not wanting to look at the end goal and find that environmentally and community protective way to get there. It's our responsibilities to stand strong and just say no.
Absolutely. After that, Maya, I have to ask you, what type of pride do you have knowing that your daughter is following your footsteps, but obviously also trying to carve her own path as well?
So my pride for Anneke has nothing to do with me and my footsteps. It really has to do all with her and her own footsteps. And it's as you said, she really is. She's charting her own course. She's charting her own path. Um, I love that it is an environmental protection path. And the thing is, I'm pretty tough, and I wouldn't have hired Anneke to work at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network or to work on work with the Green Amendments for the Generations movement if she wasn't kick-ass awesome. And I think that you all have just heard a little bit about the power that Anneke has when she speaks up for the earth and the environment. She is incredibly good at what she does. And so, as a mother, I'm proud that she is charting her own path and doing so successfully and effectively. And as her boss, I am incredibly pleased at how effective she is. And I would not be her boss if she was not so good, because I would not have hired her. Right? Because our river deserves only the best champions. Our Green Amendment movement and communities don't have second best isn't good enough for them. You've got to be the best at what you do if you want to work for the Green Amendment movement or for Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And again, I think people can witness she is incredibly good at what she does. And so that's why she does it.
Absolutely. And again, that's partly why I wanted to highlight the fact that a lot of these topics can tend to be passed down through the families over the years. Just a quick story. I moderated a panel in Chicago a few months ago. I was lucky enough to have Cheryl Johnson on the panel, daughter of Hazel Johnson, and powerful speaker, extraordinarily knowledgeable. And as she was speaking, all I kept thinking about was the decades of work, of struggle, of digging into issues that I probably didn't even know about that took us to that point. And the 300 people in the room were getting a great education from one of the best in the country because of her work, but also because of the people that came before her as well. I think that's a really, really critical point to bring up, especially if you're talking about climate change, you're talking about environmental justice, just environmental protection in itself.
Absolutely. And it's interesting when I hear Anneke speak. I mean, the truth is some of these issues that she's working on, and certainly that I'm still working on, I was working on before she was born. That's sort of it, even though I'm always the youngest person in the room. But I think it also, because I did this work, I think it also does, as you say, it gives her additional perspective, because the traditional mother isn't going to be taking her little one down to the river to try to see a sturgeon, and so excited when it's there and so bereft if it's not.
Hmm.
And she has had the experience of feeling those emotions, not from the perspective of an activist, but from the perspective of a real person, of a child who's experiencing this world. And so I think the fact that she's had those exposures have come into her being and helped inform her work. And I do love to hear her talk about how she would sit in the back of the room and was witness to what was happening. And I didn't think about it at the time, but she was getting a real world education. And how do you become an activist? How do you be effective? How do you speak? How do you hold yourself? And so it's interesting to hear her remark on it that way, because I never thought about it that way. So
I have this like one memory, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, of like, I think we were at the New Jersey legislature and I was little, and there was something with horseshoe crabs, and it was like getting the senators to sign something. You handed it to me, you were like, run up and go tell them, and go tell them. And I was like, will you save the horseshoe crabs? I could be misremembering, but it's like,
no, probably. It's probably. I do remember I always hear colleagues, well, they're not really colleagues because it's a regulatory agency. At the Delaware River Basin Commission, often people will talk about a meeting, how we were all sitting around a table, we were fighting about PCBs or something, and that slowly, like around the table, a little hand would come up and was putting napkins next to each person.
That's great.
And they still remember to this day that was just little Anneke keeping herself active, but she was in this really vibrant meeting, and I think helped break the ice a little bit for people who maybe were becoming inappropriately aggressive or hostile. And that little hand coming up, is a reminder be a person and care, because what you're talking about around this table has real implications for real people. And long after you're gone, the little ones are going to experience the benefits or harms of what we decide and do right now here today. So, it has real impact when we include others, including our children, in the work, in the proper way, in the proper way.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I want to jump into the Green Amendment now. And I think I started mentioning this a bit earlier in my introduction, but I first heard of it really through Maya's presentation at Rutgers. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, this is great. But at the same time, can businesses thrive under a Green Amendment? I had that thought. And I think that's a fair one. Um, so I think I'll start by just opening that one up. And if you want to comment on that, Maya.
Yeah. So first off, to let people know who don't know, a Green Amendment is language. It's an amendment that gets added to the Bill of Rights section of a constitution. In this case, we're primarily focused on the states, right? So gets added to the Bill of Rights or Declaration of Rights section of the Constitution. And it recognizes and protects the inalienable human right of all people to pure water, clean air, a safe climate, and a healthy environment. And the duty of all government officials to protect the state's natural resources for the benefit of all the people, and to do so equitably, including for both present and future generations. And I would say it's not just possible for good businesses to operate in places in the states where we have a Green Amendment, but it's actually critical that they have a Green Amendment, because history has demonstrated that a clean, safe, and healthy environment is vital for vibrant communities and health, right, and quality of life, but it is also vital for economic vitality, right? Businesses need clean water. Businesses need workers that are able to come to work and that are not falling down on the ground from an asthma attack or a heart attack because they're overwhelmed by air pollution, right? Businesses need to be able to be protected from non-natural human-induced flooding and flood damages and storm events or wildfires, right? Businesses are part of the community. And in fact, the very first Green Amendment in the nation, the one passed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Article 1, Section 27, passed unanimously through both legislative houses and by a vote of 4-1 of the people of the state of Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania communities had been experiencing how devastating it was to be overwhelmed by industrial operations that were spewing pollution into the air and into the water at devastating levels, that was taking from people their healthy lives, their property values, the joy of their community, their ability to swim safely in a stream, right? And so it was the experience of businesses who were not being responsible when it came to environmental protection that resulted in the passage of the very first Green Amendment. And businesses in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania are thriving just fine with the passage of a Green Amendment. And I would say that now that we've given the Green Amendment legal life, since legal action that I and my organization led in 2013, businesses are now better stewards of their communities and of their environment, and are getting the benefits of quality water, quality air, healthy workers, beautiful lands and landscapes and communities where people want to come and live to work for the business, because they get to live in a beautiful place and space where they're not being killed by toxins in the environment, right? So I think, again, it's not just that businesses can operate in a state where a Green Amendment exists. If they want to be successful in the near term and the long term, they must operate in a state where a Green Amendment, because they benefit from Green Amendment protections as much as the rest of us, including people and nature.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are currently 3 states with Green Amendments, right?
That's correct. Pennsylvania, was first, then Montana. Now, but those two states, their amendments were passed in 1971 and 1972, but they didn't actually get real legal use in life until later on. Montana around the 1999, and then it had a couple of successes. It went sort of quiet, and then it got picked up again around 2019. And in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's Green Amendment got real legal life in 2013 as part of a legal victory, again, that the Delaware Riverkeeper Network led. I and my role as a Delaware Riverkeeper, supported by our legal counsel, John Smith and Jordan Yeager, as well as a gentleman named Jonathan Kamen. And we literally breathed legal life into the amendment that had been long ignored when we challenged and defeated a devastatingly pro-fossil fuel law that was going to inflict exponential harm on communities if it was allowed to advance. And then later, and so I founded the Green Amendment movement in 2014 and embarked on this journey of trying to get an amendment in every state across the nation. So the first amendment passed in the modern era was New York's, which was voted on in 2021 and went into effect in 2022. But at this point, we have Green Amendment proposals that we're helping communities advance in over 20 other states.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. You've been busy.
Been very busy. The problem, truthfully, the biggest hurdle we have, I mean, of course there's the opposition, but we have good answers for everything. But one of the things that's so striking, the demonstrated power of a Green Amendment is incredible. Everybody instantly gets it. Yes, we cherish our right to free speech. And we know our right to free speech is properly protected because it's protected in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. If we want to have that same quality protection for our environment, we have to have that same highest level of protection. So people instantly understand it. And as people are watching the Trump administration roll back protections very lightly that are just part of a legislative process, people can see, oh my gosh, at the state level, if we had this kind of constitutional entitlement, we could be assured that in every state across our nation, we would be better protected. Activists, attorneys, legislators, they all get it. The biggest hurdle we have is getting the funders to provide the necessary funding so we can really robustly respond to every request for help. Now, the lack of funding hasn't stopped us. We still respond to every request for help, and my family invests tremendously in making it happen. But everybody gets it, because we all know how powerfully we cherish our other fundamental freedoms. We know how much we cherish clean water and clean air. And so it's an easy leap from, oh, I have a right to free speech. I have private property rights. I have religious freedom because of constitutional protection. I want and need that for my environment as well.
No, I don't want to speak for anybody, but a concern I've heard multiple times, and of course I'm paraphrasing here, is that under a Green Amendment, hypothetically, a industrial site, whichever class you want to think of, who's more or less meeting their compliance regulations, because let's just put it out there honestly, no one's perfect. Even the ones who try their best have exceedances. It unfortunately just happens. Has there been instances in the three states of increased litigation against permitted entities through the Green Amendment? And is that something that industry has to worry about?
No, it's not a worry at all, because Green Amendments are about governmental action, right? The constitutional obligation falls to government, state and local governmental entities. So if there's a constitutional violation and there is going to be a legal challenge, it's got to be focused on government action. So a private entity, whether it's a business or a property owner or otherwise, where is not going to be the subject of a constitutional challenge. It's not the way the Constitution operates. The Constitution is about governmental action. So we're really talking about bigger picture benefits and protections that result. That being said, the only cases anybody should ever care about, litigation cases, is ones that are frivolous, right? If you've got a serious, significant case addressing a serious, significant issue of concern, then good thing you have a Green Amendment and somebody has the capacity to bring a legal action in order to address that critical issue. So if anybody's saying they're worried about litigation writ large, well, then I would challenge them, because if your water is being so contaminated that it's giving kids cancer, don't you want a legal action that will stop that governmental whatever that's advancing that? Yes, of course you do, no matter who you are. So that's sort of number one. Number two, that being said, there have been zero cases where a Green Amendment has been raised in any way, shape, or form that's been dismissed as frivolous. Zero. And the number of cases that make it into the courts in a given year in any of the Green Amendment states ranges on average from 3 to 10. 3 to 10 cases a year into the courts. There are cases that are brought and addressed at the administrative level, right? And they get handled, at that lower level. But the number of cases into the courts is 3 to 10. And in fact, if you look on average in New York, 3 years, 15 cases. That's 5 a year. That is not all that much. Not when you look at the universal litigation happening in a state. So, Anneke, anything to add?
No, I tell Maya, mom, the amount of people who say that, who like come into whatever room and argue against them and say this is going to bring a frivolous onslaught of frivolous lawsuits, and a lot of times they end up being attorneys or people who have said they have a law background. And I remember one time I kind of like looked and was like, I don't understand, because when you go to law school, in your most people first semester, maybe it was in their second semester, you have to take civil procedure. And civil procedure, it's all the like the rules, the check marks about how court works. And you learn about Rule 11. And Rule 11 is that if you bring frivolous, like, attorneys sign their name to the cases they bring, and it's like that they're doing it in good faith and that they have good facts and that they believe it has merit and all that stuff. And if you did that with a lawsuit that was very on the face frivolous, that you didn't have real backing for, that you didn't have real facts for, all that stuff, the frivolous lawsuit, you could get fined, you could get disbarred. So it just kind of makes me laugh, because we do hear that from attorneys, and the amount of I have to be nice. So the amount of times I want to just be like, what, did you pass civil procedure? Because that's like the basic of it. But yeah, Maya gave you the facts. Like, it's a ridiculous argument and there's absolutely no backing to it. But that's always what makes me laugh, is that it is attorneys who say it. And I'm kind of like, did you not learn this?
I'm sure fraudulent could possibly be a part of it too, but where I've seen it come into play kind of actually revolves more around the idea of cumulative impacts and this notion that historically the system has just been broken. It's been allowing too many things, too many entities into one small area. And again, hypothetically, allow me a little room here. The one site might be doing more or less a good job, but the river next door is having big issues because there are 10 sites in the area. So if that one site gets a case against them because of a very, very, very real issue, that's not frivolous, but it might also not be that first site's fault.
Well, if they're contributing, right, they're contributing, but
Everyone does.
right.
Yeah.
That's where, one of the benefits of the constitutional oversight and how this constitutional level protection operates. It's because it ensures that when government is looking at that situation, looking at that community, looking at that river system, and that new entity wants to come in and get a new permit, the government becomes constitutionally obliged to look at the existing condition, to look at the cumulative impacts, to make a determination whether even giving the permit to that new facility or operation can constitutionally be supported given that existing condition, right? And so because of the more robust review and analysis, you're going to be in, and the ability of people to come to that regulatory agency and say, listen, to protect our rights to clean water and, and to ensure the protection of this natural resource generationally, you may not issue a permit to that new industrial operation because we're already at capacity.
Yeah.
Or, and we are an environmental justice community, and you've already overburdened us as compared to everybody else who tends to have, more money, more resources, and less melanin in their skin, right? The richer, whiter folks. So, they can turn to the Constitution and force their governmental officials to do a better job at protecting them. And when the permits because you have to have that government action. So when the permits of the already existing 10 operations come up for renewal, the people can go back to the government and say, look, you have to look at the existing condition. You have to look at the cumulative impact. You can't just rubber stamp the reissuance of this permit. You may need to now say to this regulated entity, it is time for you to get this new government issued permit. It's time for you to upgrade your technology, to modify your approach so that you are taking responsibility for your share of the problem. And as each of those operations come up, and there's the need for a new governmental decision with regards to them, the Constitution actually creates the opportunity for positive change. Whereas in the absence of the Constitution, you're right. The laws and the regulations say every single one of these can spew X million tons of this, that bad thing into the air, into the water, and devastate the environment. Oh, check the box, check the box, check the box. They're all spewing up to that amount. Don't have to look at the cumulative impacts. Don't have to look at anything else. We've checked the boxes, boom, rubber stamp the permit. And that problem perpetuates and even grows. Now, when the 11th facility comes in, oh, the legislation and regulations, we check the boxes, they're entitled to a permit too. And now we're going to make the condition worse. There's nobody doing the oversight from the perspective of people, the community, and nature, and that inalienable human right to a clean, safe, and healthy environment. When we bring the Constitutional Green Amendment into play, we transform that landscape of governmental responsibility and action and activity and give the people a real pathway to secure necessary and needed change that otherwise does not exist. So it's not about punishing or burdening the companies. It's about holding government responsible to make sure that they are not allowing this kind of inappropriate action, activity, or decision making that's resulting in and or perpetuating devastating harm.
No, I think that's fair, and I think a lot of people forget the fact that there's only been environmental regulation in this country for what now, 50 years, ballpark, and there's been industrial activity for 110, 120. So then as to how a green amendment would address things like a brownfield site, how exactly would it address things like cleaning up environmental harms that might have happened 70 years ago?
Yeah. So I'm going to speak a little bit to that issue, and then maybe Anneke can bring in, one of the communities that we work with. So, again, you've got to look for that government action activity decision, including a failure to act, right? And if you don't have that, you can't just you're not just swooping in and making things happen. So you to the extent that you have a pre-existing condition, you have to have a governmental action or activity or conscious choice not to act that you are tying your constitutional analysis and advocacy, and if necessary, legal action to. So one example, thinking about the kind of toxic site that you're talking about, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, in Chester County, a town called East Whiteland, there was an industrial operation. They manufactured tubing called Bishop Tube. And Bishop Tube was allowed to operate for many, many years in ways that resulted in incredibly high levels of toxic contamination to go into the environment. And in fact, at the 13 plus acre Bishop Tube site, the soils ended up becoming super saturated with TCE and a variety of other dangerous toxins. And the toxic contamination was seeping through the soils into the groundwater that then fed the local stream where the kids would go to collect stones for their school project, right? And the Department of Environmental Protection, the site eventually shut down, but the Department of Environmental Protection knew about the toxic condition of this site for over 30 years, back in was in the 80s. Like they knew about it. Also, but they didn't do anything. Also, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, there's the Hazardous Substances Cleanup Act, and there are existing laws that require responsible corporate parties to clean up the toxins that they are legally responsible for. Despite the existence of this law, despite the existence of Johnson, Matthey, and Whitaker Corporation, who were the known legally responsible parties for the cleanup of this site, super wealthy corporations, okay? DEP didn't do anything about it. You had a community next door where there was very good reason to believe that there were a lot of illnesses to children and others in the community that may have been tied to the toxins at this site, whether it was the toxins going into the air, to the water, or otherwise. And certainly when you're located next to a toxic site, it has implications, right, for your property values and things.
Sure.
But despite all that, the DEP did nothing. Then fast forward, still doing nothing about the toxins at the site, the DEP negotiated a sweetheart deal with the developer that would allow the developer to develop over 200 homes on this site while it remained in its toxic condition with no plan to clean that site up. This was the situation that I was confronted with in my role as the Delaware Riverkeeper, now also having at that point founded the Green Amendments movement. And long and short of it, got active, got organized, helped organize the community, and through advocacy and legal action, got that sweetheart deal declared void because it didn't meet the requirements of the law, and got the Department of Environmental Protection to actually start to exercise its authority to hold Johnson, Matthey, and Whitaker Corporation responsible for developing and advancing a remediation for that long ignored toxic site. Now, the remediation is still to happen. There are still issues going on. There's still advocacy going on. There's still a threat of 98 homes being developed there. And I threat of that because the developer is still trying to make that happen. But the community is standing strong against it. But part of our advocacy, the foundation of our advocacy and our legal action was that the government's failure to enforce this existing law to hold these responsible parties accountable to clean up this toxic site was not just a violation of law, but was a violation of the constitutional right of the people to pure water and a healthy environment. Right? So that's the power of the Constitution. Absent the Constitution, it was a difficult path forward. But now that we had this constitutional right, we were empowered, the people were empowered. It really helped make a critical difference. And now if you go to that community, every time there's a community meeting where we're talking about that site or any site, the first thing that comes out of the mouth of Kate Stauffer or, her neighbors is, I have a right. And you, local government, or you, state government, have a constitutional duty to respect and protect that right.
Now,
So
on that, I have to ask you, Anneke, there are currently 3 states that have the constitutional amendment, and actually Maya mentioned 20 others, I think, in process. Do you want to make a guesstimate now of who you think or which state might be closest or who you think is coming next?
I never actually want to guess because I think the states will surprise you. I will say when I was in law school, I had an opportunity to do an internship instead of go to school, and I was like, I'm getting out of here because it was I had gotten almost through my whole first year of law school, and then COVID hit, and online law school is literally the worst thing in the world, especially in rural Vermont. So it was terrible. So I did go to New Mexico and work on the New Mexico Green Amendment proposal back then, just in an education grassroots capacity. So I was working to get people involved, get the word out, stuff like that. So I do hold a little extra special place for New Mexico. And I think it would, of course, be very powerful since like oil and gas, it's another oil and gas dominated state. Sure. And the energy around the Green Amendment there is palpable. And really, I think the only reason we haven't gotten it passed is because there are tactics going on behind the scenes politically that have just stalled it out. It's not been voted down. It's not been canceled out. It's been stalled or run off the calendar for the session. But there's so many states, and I think it's like Maya was just in Oregon, and the energy in Oregon is really great. The energy in Michigan and Maine is really great. New Jersey has been really great. The thing is, I even hesitate to like not name all the states because I just people get it. Like people get it. And I think the only reason you haven't seen a Green Amendment pop up in every state during every session and be on the ballot for people to vote is because there are political figures at play. There is money going on in the background to buy people off that have stymied it. But when you talk to people, and actually in a meeting Maya and I were in where somebody in New Mexico industry was saying, well, we just can't support this because our people won't. And I said, well, just let it pass and your people can vote no on it. I mean, that's my whole thing too, is at the end of the day, it's not the decision of the 5 senators or that chairman or whatever. Like at the end of the day, the people get to vote on it. So if the people of your state really don't want it, like some people try to say, which is never true, but like you hear like, well, the people don't want this. Fine. Let them have their voice be heard and let them make their decision. Like Maya and I aren't there telling people to not do what they want to do. We're like, here's all the information, do what you want. But I hesitate to say, because I think the energy is great in all of them. And I think when you hear the different stories of why people support it, I mean, it makes you cry happy and sad tears. And I just think it's just about each place finding its right moment in time and its right moment in history. And so I truly believe that every state will have it eventually. It's just about finding the time.
I'm happy you said that because it actually goes into my next question to follow up. I know the ultimate goal here is to get a national green amendment, and for various reasons, that's obviously highly unlikely over the next 4 years. But what I was going to ask you is, there are obviously 50 states in our country. Would getting a certain state give more energy towards the movement than, say, just the average state? Hypothetically, would getting Louisiana or Texas or any of the larger industrial fossil fuel states to jump on this give more strength to the movement?
I mean, in my own now, I think definitely like each state makes its own point. Like again, I think when people are like, oh, Pennsylvania has that, and we have to explain the history of like why when it was originally passed, it wasn't interpreted correctly by the courts. But like now that Maya's case reinvigorated it, it's gonna like work the way it's supposed to. But I don't know, because I just feel like every story is different. I do obviously think there's power when you have certain states who are dominated by certain industry, and so I think it depends. And of course people will think things about, well, oh, that state's super pro-environmental, of course they passed it. And there's definitely like a shock value to anybody that's deemed as not environmental, but again, or not environmentally friendly.
Sure.
But again, I just feel like in every state there is communities, there are people, there are stories, and especially now with like climate change. And that's the thing too, like no state is immune from climate change. You're Absolutely getting drought or you're getting flooding, like, or you're getting this or you're getting that. Like everybody's gonna have their own issues. And so I just think it's getting them all to like getting the roadblocks to understand that. So, but I feel like Maya might have a thought, but I think I think just each one comes with its own message, and you just have to build off that.
And actually, Maya, before you answer, I definitely want to hear from you on this also, but it's been a pattern historically to get federal regulation through. Oftentimes, it's the states that ultimately drive it, and there's a critical tipping point of states. The number changes every time, whether it's 20, 30, 35, whatever. Eventually, states and industry put enough pressure on the federal government, and something happens. So, with that in mind, if you want to follow up on Anneke.
Yeah, no, I think that she said it very well. I mean, every state is its own story. And as I testified as an expert in front of the Oregon legislators last week and said at a rally, a victory for one is a victory for all. People are incredibly energized when they see a Green Amendment proposed, when they see a successful hearing, when they see a successful vote, or when they see successful use of the amendment in context. And sometimes that use is by communities, right? Whether through advocacy or litigation, but very often it's local town councils and state government officials that are relying on the amendment to do better in terms of environmental protection, right? This is not all about people going after government. This is very often government itself looking at the amendment as not just an obligation, but an opportunity to better protect the environment for their constituents. And your other point was,
Is there a critical tipping point?
oh, okay. Yes, yes. So yes, I mean, when you look at some of the biggest movements in history, right? When you look at the right to vote and ending poll taxing, and they're like, it began at the states.
Yeah,
And so I've been advocating for this state approach for the Green Amendment movement and better environmental protection for, oh boy, at this point over a decade now. And I think, as you said, history demonstrates that often it is the states that lead the way, and that is what is happening and will happen with the Green Amendment movement and meaningful environmental rights protection. And once we secure green amendments, we're going to have communities enforcing them. I mean, the reason why the Held v. Montana case, right? We talk about our victory in Pennsylvania. There are a number of victories, but a lot of people have heard about the Health v. Montana youth climate case led by Our Children's Trust. That case, the foundation of that victory was the Montana Green Amendment, which I think just further demonstrates the incredible power and value of the Green Amendment pathway.
absolutely. And this has been a very fun hour for me. I've obviously definitely learned a lot, but we're coming up on time here. So I'd like to give you both opportunity for some final thoughts. And I always ask a variation of the same final question as well. The biggest demographic that listens to this podcast is young people, students, whether it's high school, college, grad school, from around the country now and around the world. It's 63 different countries. So if you have any final thoughts, and then if you have any advice to them specifically, if they want to try to get into this type of work and support a Green Amendment.
I can, I can go. I think in terms of if you're interested in getting, I will say if you're interested in getting in environmental activism, you certainly do not have to get any sort of degree to do that. It only informs a lot of things, but Maya and I have come across so many people through this work who are smarter than an attorney, a legislator, a scientist, just by having real world experience. So I think um, it's all about owning your story and who you are and how you got there, and that can be through the school of life or going and getting your degree in different things. And so I really I think you have to own who you are and you have to own how you do it. Again, doing all that with being respectful of others and how they got there and how they do their work, as long as we're all on the same mission of protecting the environment. So I know for me, um, people think being Maya's daughter that, oh, it makes it so easy, but it actually comes with a lot of questions. I literally had a classmate of mine when I was talking fondly about my mom and how I was actually giving um, a first year law student advice about that she didn't want to clerk because that's what they tell you to do. She wanted to go do an internship at the National Park Service. Said, go do it. Don't clerk. And he said to me, how does that silver spoon in your mouth taste? And this is somebody who doesn't know anything about me.
Oh, damn.
Like I was like, wow, I got into every school by myself. Actually the law school that Maya went to denied me. So
Well, that's
I
kind
didn't
of
get
funny.
I didn't get any clout getting in. But the whole point was like, this is being Maya's daughter, yeah, like I have gotten questioned, that I didn't work for anything. And that's just not true. And I've had to own that that's what some people think about me. And so I work very hard every day to be like, this is who I am. And I don't care what you think about me. And I think that is a lot of people who do activism. You're going to have people who say, like, well, you could make more money doing this, you could do that. Own who you are and be really comfortable with that and just listen to valid voices only. And I think in terms of like classes, do if you do school, again, just follow what interests you and do things that don't always make sense. I had a when I took environmental studies, my minor advisor was like, encouraged me to take this outdoor survival course. And I thought that was a little weird and didn't think it was helpful. But I really like learned so much about just the inner workings of the environment in a very different way, like talking about how if you need to survive, think about how when a tree goes dormant, now all the energy is conserved in the middle of the tree. So if you're needing to do things to eat or survive, like think about where that energy is conserved. And so again, it's just like the answer or the way to find your end goal isn't always necessarily like that standard fare.
Mm.
So I think that's just my biggest thing is do what interests you, do what you enjoy, even if it doesn't seem standard fare or status quo or a little wonky, and just own who you are. And as long as you're doing it with a good heart and not hurting people along the way, that's always my big thing, or the environment, you'll do great and you'll do fine and you'll have a fantastic life. And just be, strap in for the ride because it might get bumpy, but it will be worth it.
And I think the thing to add to the reason why we always encourage people to do what you love educationally, is because you are going to be best at the thing you're interested in. If you're interested in math, you're going to be really good at it. If you're interested in art, you're going to be really good at it, right? And then you can take that best talent that you've developed and that you love and that you want to work on all the time and put it to work for the environment, because there is a place, space, and need for everybody in the environmental movement and in the Green Amendment movement. We need people who understand the law. We need people who know how to organize. We need people who want to research. We need people who are great at art and will do great signs. We need people who know how to research and find documents and information and bring it back. We need people who can write well. And come up with great informational pieces or marketing pieces. Those are two entirely different styles of writing. And we need the person who wants to review that written thing and edit it and make sure that there aren't any typos or anything, right? We need people who can do social media. I mean, I can go on and on and on. We need everybody. And we also need all voices. Often, when I'm involved in the Green Amendment effort, at one meeting or another, people say, okay, now there's going to be a hearing. The only people who should speak are the young people. Only the young people should speak, or only the elderly should speak, or only the indigenous people should speak, or only the communities of color should speak. And the truth is, we need everybody to speak in the Green Amendment movement, because up on that decision-making dais are a wide variety of people and a wide variety of personalities that are driven by a different messenger and kind of message. That's the other thing I hear. People go, now, Maya, you tell everybody that they need to come with their facts and figures and be super serious, and nobody needs to raise their voice. Or, Maya, people need to come forth with their passion. That everybody has an opinion on who should speak and how they should speak. And again, on that decision-making dais is a variety of personalities. And there are going to be some people who, when a young person comes up to testify or lobbies them about the Green Amendment issue, that's going to be really touched by their story of fear for their future. And there are going to be other people who are going to be like, you're just a kid, and I'm not listening to you because you don't know what you're talking about. There are going to be people who listen to the elderly. I understand you have you have years of experience and knowledge. Your input is really meaningful. And they're going to be like, you're just a freaking old lady. Shut up. Right. I mean, and that's the reality of it. And some people are moved by the passionate speech, and some are turned off by it. Some, the anger might rankle them a little bit, but it makes them listen. For other legislators, it's going to turn them off. So we need everybody to participate, whatever your talent, however it is you approach things, however it is you speak or testify or communicate. We need you, because we don't know who is going to be the right fit for every single, decision maker, again, on that decision making day, as whether it's legislators or whether it's the voters. So we need a place or space. We need everybody. We need you, whoever you are, to bring your interests and your talent. And if you want to fight for the earth, other than what Anneke said, my best piece of recommendation is don't sell out. And it can be really, really hard. And there will be people, especially if you're young, that will come to you and say, listen, when you graduate, go get a job and make lots of money and then pay off your school loans. And then when you're done paying off your loans, then you can come back, and take a lower salary and fight for the environment. Two things. One, that doesn't happen. People just don't do it. They get used to their salary, whatever. It doesn't happen. And number two, just remember, the tree that was cut as part of your work when you sold out for whomever, the child who got cancer, the person who died, right? The landscape that was, clear cut, or the stream that was devastated by pollution, they will never recover. You can come back a year, 5 year, 10 years later. You will never be able to undo the damage that you have inflicted on the earth or on the communities, right? That and the people who are being impacted. So if you really care about environmental protection, stay true to that path and, figure out how you're going to get there. Maybe you're not going to be able to do it as your profession, and then find a profession that's not devastating for the earth and volunteer your time, right? It can be hard, but you can find that path. And just always remember, if you sell out and you support devastating harm that kills kids, cuts down trees, devastates forests, drives species to extinction, you'll never be able to undo that devastation. That black spot in your soul will always be there. And if you really care, you will suffer from guilt the entirety of your life. But if you find that pathway forward, your life will be filled with joy. And as Anneke said, every day when you get up, even though you're looking at a hard day ahead, you will approach that day with joy, because you will remember that it is an honor. It is an honor to get up every day and to fight for the earth and for our communities. And every night when you go to bed, no matter how difficult or stressful the day was, you will know that you spent your day fighting for Mother Earth and the communities that you care about. And it really does make a difference. So just don't sell out. It can be hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard to do what I do. I'm on my path that I love. It's a joy. You can ask Anneke how many times I've been in the corner, slumped down crying because of how difficult something was. And then she and my husband and my son and myself and the trees and nature, help me pick myself back up, wipe away the tears, remind myself it's an honor to do what I do, and to get back to work.
Well, I think that's a beautiful way to end this conversation. I always try to end on a positive note. So, again, thank you both. I've enjoyed this and I've learned a lot. And for everyone listening, I appreciate it as always. And we have an exciting one coming up, a two-parter on actual renewable energy development across the United States, what's possible versus plausible under Donald Trump. So that one should be fun. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody.